our media guy won't like because he forced me into the earlier title. But it's around the notion about community participation and why I think it should be valued in education. Okay? And I intend for this to be interactive. I'm going to get you to do some stuff here in just a minute. I'm not a lecturer. I don't like standing down here and flipping through slides and talking to you for 50 minutes. So I want to have some feedback. And I'll invite you to share some of your stories about this as well. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. I've intentionally kept it very cryptic so that you will stay with me. So that you won't know what's going on necessarily, except I'm going to address these questions. Okay? So right off the bat, I would like for you to stand up, please. You don't need anything in your hands. And I would like for you to close your eyes. Make sure you've got a little bit of arm swing distance between you and your neighbor. And with your eyes closed, I want you to point in the direction of true north. Eyes closed, please. Okay, while you're still pointing, you can open your eyes. And I'd like for a couple of people to share why they're pointing in the direction they're pointing in. So Denise, I'm going to pick on you because you're right down here. Why are you pointing in that direction?
I think it's where the North Island is.
That's a way big picture view, okay? The North Island, okay? Somebody else who has a different sort of way that they oriented why they're pointing. Anybody? Yep.
I'm from England. I'm standing on my head.
Even bigger picture view, okay? Anybody got a small picture view?
I came here from Bromley and I had to walk in the same direction that Bromley is to here, to get here, so I was still walking sort of north.
Okay, somebody might have to help you get home and when I reveal north in just a minute, okay? One more, yes sir?
I lived down the road for about 50 years.
Yes?
I know which way the road points.
And which way are you pointing?
And I was pointing that way.
Yep, you're exactly right. You and Denise are right, okay? So north is that way, okay? So you can have a seat, please. Okay, so the point of that little exercise is that even though we have something as simple as which way north is, we all have different ways that we think of which way it is, and we have different ways that we get that. So we had a big picture view from Denise. It's in the North Island. We had an even bigger picture view about England, and then we got down to a local level, Bromley. Okay? So for the very same question, I would like for you to turn to your neighbor and talk to them for just about 30 seconds about what the true north of education is. What's the real purpose of education? Okay, go, 30 seconds. So a couple of responses, please. A couple of responses. What's the purpose or what's the true north? What's the direction? Yes, sir, Kirk the Fourth. What is it?
To get a job.
To get a job. All right. The national government would definitely agree with you. Stephen Joyce would say, yep, you're absolutely right. Okay. To get a job. Anybody got a different reason?
Communication.
Communication?
Yeah.
Okay.
Citizenship.
Citizenship? Yep.
Empowerment.
Okay.
Education, just to know things.
Just to know things. Okay. Great. A couple more.
Question and to get people enthusiastic about it.
Okay. Yep. Get you fired up about stuff. Yep. Anything else? A couple more.
Choose people that have a process of how to think.
Yep. So learning how to learn.
Maturing.
Yep. Okay. Sort of a maturing process. Okay. All of those answers are somewhere in the ballpark of what most folks would tell you. Okay. I'm going to give you 4 different ways that we've conceived of this. 2 pretty old ones and 2 very recent local ones. Okay. So the very top one, 5th century BC. The word idiot is a Greek word, and it means somebody who is concerned with themselves. Okay? So basically, the Greeks believed everybody's an idiot when they're born. Okay? We're all idiots. And it's only through education that we become citizens. And a citizen is somebody who's concerned with affairs other than themselves. Okay? Somebody who's concerned with the public good. all right? Particularly important for the Greeks because they originated, or they were the first sort of people that we think came up with this idea of democracy. Now, of course, it was a different democracy than what we've got here, but it was the general belief that people could control themselves. Okay? A little bit more recently, a US philosopher, John Dewey, he's sort of the founder of experiential education. He sort of sits at the heart of Outward Bound and all those kind of things. He believed that education wasn't about preparing for life, it was about life. Okay? And he believed that the school and life should be merged. So he had all kinds of crazy ideas about schools on farms and kids doing jobs for their education and all kinds of stuff like that. Okay? Big mover in the US in terms of that. A little bit closer to home, one of the last acts of the Labour Party before they left power was to get the New Zealand curriculum document through. It's a very progressive document. It draws from a number of sources around the world, particularly Scandinavian, and it came up with 5 key competencies that should drive the entire curriculum. Okay? This one is one of them. Participating and contributing. Okay? Now, the thing I would like to point out about that, and I'll pick on the school that I served as a Board of Trustee member for 6 years because I'm partly to blame for this. That school doesn't report on how students do with this competency. Guess which competency we report on, just like most of the other 2,000 schools in New Zealand? It's the competency that has to do with literacy and numeracy. That's what we're mainly focused on, national standards, right? These sort of get wrapped into values, okay? And I've had a look at a number of school websites. I haven't found a one that gives me any information about how the school is delivering on this competency, either in a real way or even in a sort of fuzzy, well, we went out and we did some service and it related to this. It's just simply listed as a competency, okay? And this is the law of the land. That curriculum is a legal document, okay? And then this one is much closer to home. It's right here. At the end of last year, the University Council passed a new graduate profile. It's linked to a $280 million bailout that we got from the government, and it has 5 attributes. The first one is what every university should deliver in the world, and it's basically core competence in a discipline. So if you get a BA in English, we expect you to be competent in English, right? If you get a BSc in science and in chemistry, we expect you to be competent. But it goes a bit further. So the 4th attribute is this one, engage with the community. And then this is the specific way that we're going to try to interpret that. Okay? The other 3 are bicultural competence and confidence, global awareness, and employability, innovation, and being enterprising. Okay? So we've basically told the government we will deliver on these. They're drip feeding us the money, so we have to report on how we're doing this stuff. Okay? So we have held our feet to the fire on this. And we're pretty unique in New Zealand for sure, and pretty much around the world for having gone this far. Okay? It's been rather quiet because we haven't really launched it yet, but that's part of what we're doing with these kind of things. Okay? Any questions about these things? No? All good? Okay. So let's get to the why. Okay? So that's sort of the background. So starting from the Greeks all the way up through this university. But why should this even be a part of education? Okay? Shouldn't education just be about reading and writing and arithmetic, that kind of stuff? All right? So why should this be a part of it? I've got 3 reasons. The first one is a very New Zealand reason. Okay? So I'll let you pour your eyes over those figures. But I can tell you, coming from another country to here 10 years ago, I was totally struck by the fact that this country has placed a lot of faith in people volunteering for vital services. Okay? In the US, we would pay people to do these 3 right here. Volunteers do not do those things in the States. We do not rely on that for volunteers. Okay? The jury one is interesting, and I want you to keep that figure in mind, 27%. So 27% of the people that have been asked to serve on a jury in the last year actually did it. Okay? So that means 70 some odd percent got out of it. But I want you to keep that 27% in mind. Okay? Any questions about these figures? Okay? And our media guy said, oh, don't board of trustees get paid money. One of my compatriots up here, Paul, he can affirm to me that, yes, we did get paid $50 a month. Okay? And I know Paul certainly spent more than $50 per month in his time working on lots of projects. It was just piddling. It was like gas money to get to the meeting. Okay?
I would argue that 54,134 got out of it, because I've been called twice and I've been rejected. So it wasn't a case I got out of it, I was rejected.
Oh, okay. These are people who got out of it.
Are there grounds of poor health in my case?
What's that?
Are there grounds of poor health?
There are people that were asked to serve in a jury and they said, no, I'm not going to do it. Right? Department of Justice figures.
Actually, as an employer, I've written a lot of letters saying we can't do this work.
Yep.
And I've never had one refused.
Yep. Okay. So again, I just want you to keep in mind vital services that we have put in the hands of volunteers. Yep.
You haven't got St. John on that list?
No, I know I don't. Yep. I know. That's a big one. And I know that's one, and I just haven't gotten into it, and I don't quite know how to crack that one, but I know that's a big one. Yep. Okay. Cool. So just on a personal level, I know when the fire bell goes up in Sumner that the people responding to that are my buddies. And they're not getting paid, and they certainly work their asses off after the earthquakes. They put their lives on the line, put their families on hold, and they went and did this out of their own goodwill. Okay? My question to you to ponder is, can we assume that's always going to be the case? And I'm getting ready to show you a little case study that would suggest not. Okay? So if we look at school boards of trustees, in 2010, which was the main sort of election cycle, so it runs every 3 years, so 2010 was the last one, there were 46% of the schools in this country that did not have to hold an election. And the reason for that is they either didn't have enough people running for the spots, or they had just the right number of people running. So there was no election held. Okay? From the last election in 2007 to the one in 2010, there are 1,100 fewer trustees. And I don't know the answer to that, but I think it means what we did at Sumner, we scaled back the number. We used to have 7, now we have 5. So our -2 is part of that number. Okay? And we did it for a variety of reasons. These are Christchurch schools. I'm not going to reveal who they are. But if you notice, 2 of them did not need elections. The bottom 3 that did need elections, and I point to this one C particularly, they had 2 parent positions. They had 3 people running, 274 votes cast. Every household gets a vote for every parent that's involved in the school. The school has between 800 and 1,000 students. I don't want to reveal exactly the number because I don't want to pick on them. But 274 is less than 20% of the people that voted for who are going to be in charge of their kids' schools. And it's an easy ballot to fill out. It's simple. You don't even have to go to like a place on a day. Just fill it out, right? Gets a little better at these, but still, you're just not getting that much turnout. And you're certainly not getting that many people running. Okay? So I don't think we can assume that those numbers on this slide are going to hold up. I just don't think it's going to happen. Okay? And there are lots of reasons for that. I'm not necessarily going to be able to go into those, but I don't think we can place too much faith on these numbers holding. Okay? So here's some wider stats, and the stats on this are a bit hard to find. So the Ministry of Internal Affairs did a survey in 2013. They said that 28% of New Zealanders volunteered their time. Self-report. Okay? Same figure as the jurors, ironically, or interestingly. The majority were between 40 and 49 years old. It continues a steady downward trend. They don't tell us what the previous percentage was, but they said it's continuing a decline. Okay? Sort of on the other hand, there's a thing called the World Giving Index, and it sends out 1,000 surveys to various countries. And for New Zealand, 58% of the people who responded to the survey said that they gave. And they gave either by donating money, volunteering their time, or helping a stranger. Okay? So New Zealand is ranked 5th in the world. behind Myanmar in the US, which are tied for first, which are also two of the countries with the highest income disparities on the planet. So ironically, they're also they're giving the most. Canada and Ireland, you'll like that, Brita. Australia is 6th, so we beat Australia. Sweet. So a little bit different kind of stats here. So our own stats tell us 28%, but then this giving index tells us 58%.
Is that on a government level or an individual within the country, an individual level?
This one.
Yeah.
Individuals. Yep. Okay. So maybe the 1,000 people that filled out the survey weren't the same as these people that filled out that survey. Who knows? Or maybe they interpret it differently. Maybe this was seen as something not this. Like helped a stranger is a pretty fuzzy one.
Yeah, is it like helping someone across the border?
Seems like we should have more than that, kind of, you know. Open the door for them. Let them out in traffic. You know, for God's sake, we need that here in Christchurch, right? Okay. Any thoughts about this? Should we be concerned? Maybe at the top one, should we be proud? Maybe the other ones? I mean, we're 5th, that's pretty good. Yep.
Where did you actually get the figures from?
It's called the World Giving Index. You can look it up.
Yeah.
It's a report. They sent surveys out and they got 1,000 respondents from every country in the world.
It doesn't mean much. So.
Self-report again.
Yeah.
Right. Self-report. It's what we got to go on.
I find it really interesting that they say the majority of those that volunteered are between 40 and
I thought that too. Yep.
because those are often very, very busy years.
Yep.
Say families. And
Yeah.
people
Yeah, I thought that too.
Situation.
Yep.
Whereas retirement age is the time where perhaps a few more people have got time to give.
Maybe they didn't send them the surveys.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Looking at that.
Yeah. And I mean, the stats are really difficult to find. I asked a local group, Volunteer in Canterbury, for some stats, and they don't really have stats that are kind of like this. I mean, they know how many people come see them, but then out of the wider population, they haven't quite done that work yet. And maybe that's work that I can pick up. Okay? The interesting one on this World Giving Index was this: there is no link between individual wealth and giving. And I'll share with you in a little bit one of the only variables we know that seems to be related to people volunteering or not. And it has nothing to do with wealth. It has nothing to do with religion or background or any of that kind of jazz. It's much simpler than that. I'll share that in a minute. Okay? So let's be proud of something. All right? So here at the university, we had between 9,000 and 11,000 students participate in the Student Volunteer Army from 2010 until the present. It's currently the second largest club on campus. Around 1,500 students belong to it. There's no one in this picture. This is the leadership group. There's no one in that picture over the age of 25. They were completely self-organized, completely sort of managed and driven. None of us were involved in it at all. They did it kind of on their own. The university wasn't quite sure whether to embrace that or not at first, because we weren't sure if a 20-year-old was going to drive a digger through somebody's house and end up making it look pretty bad. But as we know, they did an amazing job. They shoveled enough silt, and this was a figure they just told me, to fill up the Empire State Building. Okay? Now, the challenging question for that, for me, is you guys just saved the government several $1 million in labor, in resources, in all kinds of stuff, right? What would have happened if these guys hadn't have done that? I think that would have still been sitting there, to be honest. There wasn't anybody coming in behind them to do it, right? Sam Johnson says, very famously, that when he got the idea to start the Facebook page, he got that idea on Sunday after the Saturday earthquake, September 4th. He called City Council first thing Monday morning, and of course everything was all hell broke loose at that point. But he left a message and he said, there are a group of us from the university that want to go out and clean up. Just want to check with you guys and see if you can point us in any direction and if it's okay. He's still waiting for the call back. Right? He just said, to hell with it, we're going to go do it. And it was messy. It was really messy the first week they did it. They went out to Hallswell in jandals, in those short rugby shorts and the singlets. No gloves, no masks, no anything. They didn't even have buckets. They were using little kids' sand buckets, and they had to move the silt to the street and then to the curb and then to the street. Total mess the first week. By the second week, though, they had it pretty dialed. And they certainly had it dialed by 2011.
It's because his sister was involved.
What's that?
His sister was
She helped out quite a bit. There was quite a bit of support around Sam to make it happen. Exactly. Exactly.
Do you think the psychological effect would be far more than anything you could put a number to?
Absolutely. And we'll get to that in just a second. Absolutely. Okay. Any questions about those folk? Yasna?
Second by one account, second in the university club. Do you count UCSA?
No, that's the overbiting structure. So second behind INSOC, Engineering Society. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So reason number 2. So that was my reason number 1, was this notion that we need it nationally. We certainly needed it locally. Okay? No doubt about it. We needed volunteers to step up and do stuff for the earthquakes. And I'll go into a couple of other examples post-quake in a minute. Okay? Reason number 2. This is a more practical one. It sort of relates to what Little Kirk was saying. It has to do with academic and professional enhancement. Okay? So there was a meta-analysis, which means these folks have taken 62 research studies that are all focused on this thing. And we can either call it community engagement, we can call it community participation, we can call it service learning, whatever. It has to do with doing service within an academic setting. So they found 62 studies, and they had to meet certain criteria, over 11,000 students, and they had these positive gains versus control groups. Okay? And significant gains, statistically significant gains. Okay? So academic performance, how they felt about themselves, kind of what you were just saying about psychological effects, attitudes towards school and learning, interest in civic involvement, and social skills. So all positive stuff. And this was with every level of education. This is with university, high school, primary. Okay? This is what we've done here. This was a PhD student of mine from a couple of years ago. What he did was he looked at 2 particular classes. One is a management class, a 200 level class, about 125 students. The other one is a geography 300 level class, about 70 students. And he measured them pre the class and post the class. And he used a survey that measures student engagement. How engaged were they in their studies? Okay? The bottom line is the post, the light line is pre. So for the 200 level, it was an average gain of 11 points on each one of those categories. On the 300 level course, it was about 20-point gain. Okay? And this survey that was used as the pre-survey was a survey used university-wide. So the pre reflects the university. So this would be the 300 level students had they not taken this class. They would be sitting there. And then because they took the class, they were more engaged. Okay? So that was on the surveys. Qualitatively, these were the 4 things he found students kept saying about themselves. Again, it relates to this psychological idea, some of it, right? They were active in their learning. The Geography 300 class, it meets once on campus for the whole semester. Once. The rest of the time, it's small groups out working with community groups to solve their questions that they have that relate to human geography. Okay? So they only meet once in a place like this. And then the rest of it, they're just out and about doing stuff. Okay? Active learning. They all felt like they were part of something larger. So it wasn't just an essay they were going to turn in and sort of run away from it while the lecturer grades it. This was a report that the groups were actually going to use. Okay? They also felt like what they were doing was intrinsic, worthwhile, helped and contributed. And then this is the cool one. They felt like they were a new person after this class. I don't know about you, but when I sat in these lecture theaters as an undergraduate student, I might have felt like a new person, but it wasn't a better person. It was maybe a bored person sometimes, or it was, a stifled person. It certainly wasn't a new me, right? Kind of evangelical. Okay? This is from a class that we started after the earthquakes. And this is a student who took it. It focuses on going out and learning about what folks did after the earthquakes and also doing some service projects. And as she says in there, she's studying law. And thank goodness we have some lawyers who think this way. I think using this broader approach when I'm studying law could definitely help me. I've started to think about the ways that I can use my skills to help people. Okay? So not just studying law just to be a lawyer and go make some dough, right? Studying law to now maybe go help folks. How can I use this degree, use these skills to go help folks? Okay. One of the interesting things we heard from some of the Student Volunteer Army leaders who were law students, when they graduated in 2011 and they went to some job interviews, they were told very pointedly by these law firms, if you come from Canterbury and you don't have Student Volunteer Army on your resume and you were there during the earthquakes, we are not interested in you. And these are top law firms, right? These ain't the touchy-feely fuzzy guys, right? So why? Why would they have said that?
They had a good reputation.
They had a good reputation, and also why? What did they know about somebody who... Yeah, and they knew that these folks went out and did stuff. They answered the call, right? They cared. They saw some...
Communicated with their community.
Yeah, they saw something bad happening, and they went out and did it, right? They were problem solvers. They had to have some teamwork, communication skills, da-da-da-da-da. Right? We've also heard from several other firms and other disciplines that what they're looking for now are students in the B+, A- range, not A+. And it's the same reason, because they think a B+ engineer has probably had a little bit more well-rounded experience than an A+ engineer. Gross generalization, but true sometimes. Okay? So reason 3, personal development. Okay? This is something that the mental health organization here in New Zealand started, 5 ways to well-being. You'll notice that a number of these are related to this community engagement idea, connecting, giving, being active. And then this is what we know about well-being and about people's sort of sense of autonomy and power, that it's related to having autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Okay? If you can hit some of those, some combo of those 3 things, folks are going to feel better about themselves. Okay? So what we've done here with this particular course that was after the earthquakes is, in addition to collecting some survey data, we've also tracked them as they take the course. Okay? And these are 3 quotes from the same student, and their responses to 3 different phases of the course. So at the very beginning of the course, we go out and we do a volunteer project. We just go out and we clean up some rubbish, or we fix a park, or we do something like that, right? And this was the student's response. She felt like the Lone Ranger. My service was good and it was needed. I'm the savior for you poor people, right? I'm coming from university and I can save you. Okay? For the next phase of the course, we look at service a bit more critically, which you're going to do in just a minute. We examine that maybe sometimes it's not always the best thing to go charging into a place and help out. And then we have a little bit of a confessional kind of notion here. It's like, oh, wait a minute. In order for me to have felt good as the Lone Ranger, that required you to be in a pretty crappy spot. So now I don't feel so good about feeling good about helping you out of your crappy spot, because it was dependent on you being in the crappy spot. Right? By the end of the course, this is sort of where we want to get to, and this is a swamp. And that's real life. It's muddy, it's mucky, it's dark, it's gray. We don't know where we're going sometimes, but hey, that's life, right? It ain't black and white like this. It ain't always going in to save the day. Sometimes you've got to make some tough calls about how you're going to deal with this stuff, which I'll invite you to do in just a minute. Okay, any questions?
Swamps are also full of biodiversity.
What's that?
Swamps are also full of biodiversity.
They sure are. Absolutely. And then these are the pre-post surveys we do in this Christchurch 101 class. The first 3 questions are related to critical thinking. So this is before the class, this is after. And the last 2 have to do with volunteering or community engagement. So again, we have gains from pre to post on these surveys. Okay? All right. So that's the why. Now let's move into the how. And this is where you get to play around a bit. Okay? So this is the kind of stuff that we do with students. So it ain't just going out and doing volunteer work and going, yep, you did a great job. Okay? The real trick to this stuff is reflecting on it and thinking about it. Okay? So there's a guy in the States named Adam Davis, and he has boiled it down to 5 reasons why people go and help someone else or do service or give or do whatever you want to call it, volunteer or donate money, okay? What I want you to think about is the last time you helped somebody or something, however you define it, and I want you to think of the main reason why you did it, and we'll see if it matches Adam Davis's, okay? So just think about that for about 30 seconds, and I'll ask for some input before I share with you what his 5 reasons are.
No one else is going.
Okay.
Because I could.
Okay.
Because
I enjoyed it.
Yep. Cool.
It was a need.
Okay. Yep. Anyone else?
Because I'm good at it.
Okay.
It's acquired.
Yep. Okay.
Betterment of the organisation and the person that you're working with.
Okay. So when I show you his 5 reasons, I want you to try to think where you would fit into those. If you had to define why you helped out down to one of these 5 things, I want you to figure out where it goes, okay? So in his basic formula is we go into things thinking service is good, it's simple, we'll go donate some money or we'll go help feed some people at the homeless shelter, whatever it'll be. But he wants us to get to the point of service is not simple, okay? So here are his 5 reasons. Okay? He says it all comes down to that. So when you go help somebody, it's one of those 5 things. Could potentially be a combo of them, right? There's a case study, there's a case...
He was American. Most of those, I would say, are American reasons. I don't think they'd be New Zealand reasons.
Who's number 1 in rural giving?
But is that because New Zealanders just go, oh, that's just what you do? I don't even consider it giving.
28% said they volunteered.
Yeah, but that's because what do you consider volunteers?
I don't know. So which one of these do you disagree with?
I actually agree with all. I've done quite a bit of volunteering, and I agree with all of them. I wouldn't say we're God's children. I'd say we're all people.
Yep.
I don't like the religionization of it.
Yep.
But yeah, I agree with all of them. Volunteers for all of those people.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd agree with all of them, I just worded it differently.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that would make sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not sure that winning praise is one of the main drivers, if it's all.
Like the self-praise.
Yep.
It's the praise you give yourself if you're content in doing it and you feel good about it.
Yep.
That's more important than other people giving you praise.
Yeah. And I think that probably builds into that one a bit. Yep.
Yeah, that seems really generic. Most of the time I do something for others is that if I'm in their situation, I would want somebody to do something for me.
That's that one. Empathy.
The empathy. Okay.
Yep. Yep. I mean, he's being very reductionist. He's being very simple about it, but he's being provocative, right? So he's saying, let's think about these things, and let's use these 5 reasons as a way to think about them. Now, the interesting thing is to look at case studies where you can have all 5 of these things going on at the same time, right? And there's a study that we do in the class that looks at Sean Penn and the help that he's given Haiti. He's all 5 of those things all at the same time, right? He's doing it at the same time he's fighting a DUI court case back in LA. He's getting divorced from his wife. Those are the guilt things. He's doing it, you know, kind of as a photo op to rebuild his image. He's doing it because he sees himself as being downtrodden like the Haitians somehow. I don't know. So he's got all 5 of these things going. So that's the complexity with this. It's not as simple as saying, oh, well, I'm a number 5 or I'm a number 4. It's we can go into something, and we might go into it with one of these, and then once we get in there, it becomes maybe something else.
I'd go along with it.
Okay? So here's another way that we play around with this, and this is where you get to have a good bit of fun here with your neighbors. So the Torah, which is the ancient religious guidance book text for Judaism, it actually ranks the way you can help people. Okay? And usually when I do this with students, they hate it. Okay? They don't think there should be a ranking system for different helping actions. Okay? Well, what I'm going to invite you to do with your neighbor, I'm going to give you 8 actions on here. And with your neighbor, you need to rank them from best to worst. So 1 to 8. Okay? And what I want you to do first is establish what you would agree to be the best and get to the bottom one first, so 1 and 8, and then fill in, because we're not going to have time to do them all. I'll give you the answers, but we're not going to have time to do them ourselves. So just about a minute or two to come up with, out of these 8 things I'm about to show you, what's the best way to help and what's the worst way. And then see how many you can fill in. Okay? Here you go. Now talk among yourselves. This isn't a test. What's the best way to help out of those 8? What's the worst? So an angel tree is like at Christmas, B&Z had one set up in their lobby where you could go pick and it said, Sean wants a bike and he's 12 years old. And so you kind of get a sense of who the person is you're going to give something to. But they're not going to know who it came from. Okay, about 30 more seconds to come up with 1 and 8 at least.
But the community's got facilities
Okay, if I can have you back together, please. Okay, somebody want to share what they came up with as number 1? Kirk.
Is number 1 the worst or
The best.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, what's the? Did you have the worst one?
Yeah, the second one.
This.
Giving for an amount less than you can afford.
You're close. That's number 7. Okay. So I'll just use shorthand up here. So 7 is giving a lesser amount than you could actually do. Okay. Somebody else. Yep.
I personally think teaching a prisoner to read.
Was number 1?
Yeah, it's a whole provided good things.
Yep, you're correct. The Torah backs you up on that. So go a little bit further. So it opens up things. Why?
I mean, you can, if a prisoner can read, then they'll be able to kind of learn a bit more by being able to read other things as well and teach themselves.
Yep. I do some work with the neighborhood police team in Phillipstown. One of the number 1 problems in Phillipstown are the people that have been in prison and they're illiterate and they can't get a driver's license. So they can't get a job that's out of Phillipstown, right? The number 1 variable for prisoners in the California prison system is illiteracy. It's along with race, but then that's a whole different ballgame. But illiteracy is a huge, huge part of it. So you're right. What does teaching somebody to read, particularly if it's a prisoner and if you're not not from that background, what would it entail? If you actually did it, what would it entail?
Give a man a fish, you feed him a day.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What does it entail, though? What's the practicality entail?
Increase in self-belief.
Pragmatically, though, what happens?
Supervision. Company.
Yep.
Good time. Physical.
Contact was...
Exactly, okay. So time.
Treating them like a human being, you're helping by enabling them to be better.
Yep.
Do you mean outcome pragmatic?
No. I mean the actual, like, what's it look like?
It's personally showing concern to the person.
Yeah, it requires a relationship. Okay? It's not just a one-off. It's not just, okay, I'm going to go on Saturday and give a couple hours and teach this person how to read. Right?
It's not just putting something in an envelope and giving it.
It is not at all. It is a lot of back and forth. It would not be clean. It would be quite messy, I predict. I haven't done it myself, but I guarantee it would be a bit messy, particularly coming from a background that doesn't match that person's. It would probably be a bit challenging. There would probably be some ethical challenges, some moral dilemmas. It would get messy, all right? But it's a relationship, okay? Let's go to number 2 because I think that's the most interesting compared to this one. What's number 2?
Donating a blanket.
Exactly. Why?
Because you're helping.
No, let's go.
It doesn't rely on money or it's an example.
Doesn't have to be a blanket. It could be a can of food at the basket at New World.
It's action to immediate need. Kind
Knowing what you're giving, not
Why is it number 2 and why is that other one number 1?
Because they're personal things.
these people.
And it's anonymous.
It's one-off physical well-being.
You're giving it to an organisation that knows what to do with it.
I'll tell you. I'll stop playing the lecture and I'll tell you. All right? Number 1, right? You're getting down and dirty. You're right next to somebody. It's going to involve a relationship. It involves a lot of shared space. It involves a bit of shared power because you're going to have to learn from them about how they learn, right? Number 2, there are no strings attached whatsoever. Nobody owes anything from that, right? You could donate a blanket tomorrow to the City Mission, which, by the way, needs them. I read in the paper today. You could drop off a blanket there tomorrow, and you could bump into the person that receives that blanket tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night. You wouldn't know that they received the blanket from you. They wouldn't know that you gave the blanket to them. There's no power structure. There's no hierarchy. There's no nothing. It just goes and solves a need, right? There's no, you've got to pay me back or I feel obligated to you, any of that stuff.
But wouldn't that be the same with the anonymously giving the gift to an angel tree?
That's number 3.
So why is there a difference?
Because that is the giver actually knows who's getting it, okay? And there are various instances where there are other people that sort of overhear somebody that owes money. Like they had this big thing in the States a couple of years ago at Christmas where people would go in and they would find out people that owed money on toys, like lay-by stuff, and then they would pay the rest of their bill. So the person giving the money actually gets a little bit of joy out of it because they know that they're giving it to something specific. But the recipient is protected. They don't necessarily know who's done it. They're just getting the good of it. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4 is the one just below it.
Really?
Yep. And the reason for that is that when you name a building after yourself or you funded it, and that's sort of a clunky example. All right, I'll give you the Torres example in just a second. But basically, if I named this lecture theater after me, I wouldn't really know who was benefiting from it. Even though every time somebody walked by and they saw my name on the door.
Egotistical. I mean,
the facility is still there for
I've helped out. I've helped out, right? So the Torres example of this was that the wealthy people were distinctive by the way they dressed back in those times. They had different kinds of togas or robes or whatever. And they would walk through the poorer parts of the village and they would put gold coins in the folds of their toga and their robe. And the poor people knew that. And so they could come up from behind and take a coin out of the robe and go about their business. So the recipient knows who the giver is. The giver doesn't know who's getting the joy out of it. Okay, and that's my clunky modern example. Okay. Then those top 3 go sort of in succession. This one, giving without being asked, is number 5. Giving for the amount requested is number 6. Amount less than you can afford is 7. And then finally, the totally anonymous one is, the cleaning up rubbish is number 8.
But giving without being asked, they might not have wanted the election.
I know, I have trouble with that one. I have trouble with that one, yep.
You're being quite arrogant.
This is the Torah, this isn't me. It's not me. It's not me.
I don't need to know.
But a board is on the busybody.
Yep, it's not me. So that I have trouble with that one because I've often fallen into potential trouble with that. But that's that one. Let me give you one quick example of so when we do this with students, they don't like this because they're like, oh, you're discouraging us to volunteer, you're discouraging us to give. And it's not like I want people to walk around with this on a laminated card and they come across a situation that needs help. Oh no, that's a number 8, I'm not going to do that one, right? A real life example of this that I recently experienced is I was back in the States. It was during the summertime. And I was having a meal with my parents. And where I was sitting, we were sitting by a window. and I could look out the window, and I saw a young woman, very young woman, with a baby and a guy, and they were walking up the street. And the guy suddenly peeled off and went behind a building across the street. And I was kind of like, okay, something weird is going to happen. You know, this is kind of strange. So the woman and the baby come into the restaurant, and it was kind of a fast foodie restaurant. And, you know, it was just hot as hell and sweaty and humid. And she came in, and I think she was fairly known to the guy because she came in and she said, can I just have a seat? And the guy said, yep. Do you need some water? Yep. And then she sat right behind us, and she pulled her cell phone out, and she started to talk very loudly, and it wasn't a real conversation. Like, it didn't have the pacing of a conversation, right? It was all about, my boyfriend has drained the money out of the account, my car's out of gas, my baby doesn't have formula, I don't have enough money for diapers or food. Very loud, right? And so she's behind me, and my parents are sort of sitting facing me, and they're seeing her. And they're starting to get a bit squeamish and getting a bit uncomfortable. And I'm like going, okay, crap, I teach this stuff, what do we do? You know, what the hell do we do? And I'm kind of running through these things, okay? The best thing to have done would have been to offer to take her down. It wasn't very far. It was a couple of blocks away to like a supermarket pharmacy place, right? So we could have physically accompanied her down there, bought the stuff that she's asking for with her, right? That to me, I was going, okay, that's the best thing to do. Okay, I'm also got two parents who are in their 70s, and I've seen this guy that's hiding behind the building over here, because this is all a big setup, I'm pretty convinced. And the way the woman was presenting, she looked probably like she was on crystal meth or pee and that kind of stuff. We have a problem in our town with that. And so I'm like, oh crap, you know, if we take this woman down here, this dude's going to follow us, and who the hell knows what's going to happen, right? So number one's out of the question. We're not getting sort of in a relationship with this person. It's just too messy at this point, right? So what can we do? Well, I was strongly suggesting let's buy her something to eat here, because that would have been kind of clean. We could have bought it and then gotten the heck out of there. My parents wanted to give her money. And in the end, we gave her some money. And it just felt wrong. It felt dirty. It didn't feel like the right thing to do, but it also felt like we could not do anything. So all of that's to say, I'm immersed in this stuff. This is what I'm trying to teach with folks, and I have trouble with it, right? This is hard stuff. This is not simple stuff. This is challenging, difficult stuff, right? And we can use these frameworks to help us out, but a lot of times we're kind of like, okay, we're going to go number one, man, it's going to be a dirty, sort of messy situation, and we got to be ready for it. For whatever it entails, physical danger, you know, emotional trauma, whatever. Okay? So this is some of the stuff we do with our students. We work through this stuff. Okay? So real quickly, just to conclude here are ways that this can happen within a school setting. Okay, these are the practical pieces to this. It's called service learning. It's taking academic content, combining it with relevant service, and then reflecting on it. Okay? So what we did with the Student Volunteer Army folks that wanted to, we offered them a course that they could take those experiences that they had out working in the streets with all kinds of folks. They could bring those back into a classroom like this. We could look at the ways other people have responded to disasters, and then we could reflect on it. You know, what did you notice when you were in Aranui helping folks out because you'd never been there before? What were the houses like? What's the school like? What are the people like? Let's think about that. You know, is there some disparity between there and Findleton where you live? Yep. What's going on there? Right? So the experiences are just gateways to reflection. So in my view, I don't really care what the service is. A lot of people get hung up on, oh, it's got to be this meaningful thing. It's got to be this big thing. We change the world. I don't think so. I think it just needs to be an experience. Okay? And then these are the three outcomes that we expect to get out of doing this stuff. All right? Some kind of professional or academic education, something having to do with citizenship, and something having to do with personal growth. Okay? And then that's the model that we use to create that course and that we're using to sort of tweak some other courses here. Real quickly, I'll skip that one. You'll have to come back another day to hear that one. There are three things that have led me to this. Okay? The first one was after the initial earthquake. And you can see my chimney there is not looking too sweet, right? About 30 minutes after I took this photo, a guy up the street came down and he said, let's deal with that. And me being from the US, I said, can we deal with our own chimneys? Are we going to get sued if it falls over? What's going to happen? I said, hell no, we're getting up there and fixing it. So we took it down, and when we got up on our roof, we looked around, and every other chimney, of course, on our street looked like that. So he and myself and another guy just had a ladder, and we just went, you know, roof to roof, right? For that day, I felt useful. After that day, PhD, big freaking deal, man. I'm not a builder. I'm not an emergency responder. I'm not in the fire brigade. You know, I sat on my butt for 2 weeks, twiddling my thumbs. I wasn't useful. I didn't have anything to do. My skills were not useful at that point. You know, I went out and distributed water and I did some various things, but I couldn't find a way to link up my skill base with what was needed. Okay? This was on the night of the 22nd. After it took me 6 hours to get from here back to my house in Sumner, got back there, packed up my wife and kids, had a couple of other families in tow. We started the long journey to get out of Christ Church. We were getting out. Sumner wasn't looking too flash then. On Breezes Road, right near Arnui High School, I'd never been down Breezes Road before in the 7 years I'd lived here. Never been through there before. So I was trying to find a way out of the city where the bridges weren't closed off. These two young women stopped us right in front of Arnui High school students by the look of them. And I was like, oh, what are they doing? You know, we're in a big four-wheel drive, we're fine. They stopped us. You know, it was rainy that night. They started to shovel mud and stuff back into the holes that we were getting ready to drive over to help us get out. And it nailed me in the stomach because I was like, we can leave. I don't think these guys can leave. Again, I was like, man, I just feel useless. This feels lame, man. I need to do something to help this situation, and I couldn't figure out what to do, right? So we escaped up to Hanmer Springs, where we camped out for a few days. And at that point, the Student Volunteer Army was back in full swing, out in their green t-shirts, you know, doing awesome stuff. And the news guy came on, and he showed this, you know, visual of them shoveling the silt and doing all this. And he said this, okay? And when he said that, my wife, Susan, just kind of jabbed me in the side, and she goes, that really pisses you off, doesn't it? And I was like, hell yeah, it does. I'm going to do something about it. That afternoon, I sent an email to the number 2 guy in charge at the time here, and I said, hey, I've got an idea. Let's figure out a way to help these Student Volunteer Army guys process their experiences by bringing it back into a real educational setting. Let's not have them come back in 3 weeks when we reopen or whenever we're going to reopen and have them go straight back to their chemistry lecture, straight back to their sociology lecture. Let's have them process what they've done. This is huge. This is probably the most significant thing they will have ever done at university, and we can't let it go untouched. Right? And finally, after I got the go-ahead from the number 2 guy and the go-ahead from the number 1 guy, Rod Carr, to go forward with this idea, I immediately called the university that my father had attended in New Orleans. And my dad went there on a football scholarship. He's done quite well, so he has stayed connected with the university. He's been a contributor to the university. He's been very proud of it. And he's been no more proud of it than in 2005. This is New Orleans. There's the skyline up there. This is the lower 9th Ward, totally flooded out. When his university, Tulane University, had to shut down for a semester. So they didn't even do what we did. They just shut their doors. They said, man, we don't even know if we can reopen. We're going to shut. When they reopened in December of 2005 to get ready to start again in January of 2006, they said, okay, we need to do something about this. So we as a university are going to take it on board to partner with the city to help them rebuild. So we're going to require every student that comes here to take 2 classes that have them out doing stuff in the community. Tulane is a very wealthy school. Costs about $55 grand a year to go there. Okay? Very wealthy students, pretty elitist. And they said, to heck with that. We're going to get out and about in the rough part of New Orleans and help them deal with this. Right? Immediately following the hurricane, they lost about half their students. They went from about 8,000 to about 4,000. That trend continued for 2 years. But by 2010, Tulane had the highest number of applications for enrollment of any university, bar none, in the US. Harvard, Stanford, Yale, whatever. 45,000 people applying for 1,500 places. And this is why. They started to get the students who were not only bright and capable, they got the students who were the do-gooders. So now it's a pretty crazy campus because you can go there and you go to a football game and you know that every one of those football players has done something out in the city. And you go walk around campus and you could stop any student and say, hey, what have you done in New Orleans? And they could tell you. Every student at that place has done work in the city of New Orleans. So we've used that as our inspiration. Questions, comments?